If you're an owner, buyer or seller of a Lotus Emira, you need to pay attention. The market just flipped, and this can cost or save you a ton of money.
You see, flipped means different things in different markets.
US prices, for example, started to fall rapidly while prices in the UK stabilized completely.
It's about time we start to break down these markets to understand what's happening. So here's what we'll do.
First, we will talk about the common denominator across the markets, the initial price development. After that, we'll zoom into the US, UK and German markets and establish how they differ from each other. Finally, we'll focus on the US and compare the Emira to the rest of the market and some of its direct competitors.
Let's get started with the initial price development.
After the launch, there was quite a bit of hype around the Emira, but deposit holders had to be patient. Deliveries were delayed over and over again. It was inevitable that some buyers would try to benefit from this by flipping the first deliveries. The Lotus community monitored the prices closely, and many forums featured lengthy discussions about one of the first Emiras that was auctioned.
Now for a brief period, cars actually sold at MSRP or slightly above MSRP, and this goes both for the US and the UK.
But the hype died quickly. Starting MSRP in the US was approximately $95,000 for the V6 version, but we can see that prices quickly increased to $111,000 in July 2024. It turns out that this was the market top. The market flipped. Prices started to decline, and by the beginning of 2025 they were back at the original MSRP level.
Now, like many other car manufacturers, Lotus increased MSRP considerably. But contrary to, for example, the Porsche market, this didn't result in price increases for used cars.
Prices continue to fall, and the current median price is $92.6 thousand. This is 8.6% lower than 1 year ago. Starting MSRP sits currently at $113,000, quite a bit higher.
Despite the strong start, the US market doesn't make a strong impression. Moreover, more granular inventory data reveals a potential troublesome situation.
Supply peaked in January at 60 clean title cars, mainly driven by relatively new cars. Yet, demand for all this supply doesn't seem exceptionally strong. The carried over inventory data tells us something about the selling speed of Emiras. It shows the percentage of cars that didn't sell within 3 months. The number peaked at 40% in January 26. In other words, 40% of the cars that were for sale in January were also for sale in October, up 31% from the 9% in October.
So were the cars selling quickly before?
Well, yes, the market average is 32%, but having a low carried over inventory rate often comes at a cost.
Sellers had to discount their cars substantially in order to shift them.
The discount rate shows the price drop for cars that didn't sell within 3 months, and this rate typically has a seasonal component. It is less negative in the summer than in the winter, and we can see this in the Emira market as well. Looking at the winter period, we can see that the average discount rate sits around the 4% mark, approximately the same as last year.
So this means that with the same discount percentage as last year, the cars are not even close to selling as quickly. So combining this with the weak pricing data, it seems reasonable to arrive at the conclusion that the Emira market weakened significantly and still isn't very strong. Later in the video I'll come back to this point.
US data for the 4-cylinder variant is still accumulating, but the past 9 months reveal that the depreciation rate will be at least as high as in the V6 market.
And that brings us to the UK market. Prices also flipped over there, but towards the other direction.
Emira prices fell quickly in the UK, and perhaps quicker than many expected. They lost 14.9% in their first year and continued to depreciate quickly after that. But all of this changed in 2025. We can see the first slowdown in depreciation, resulting in a minus 1.2% year-over-year price drop. Now, while this might look great, it is important to know that this is an average number. The very first Emiras with more than roughly 7,000 miles were quite stable, while new ones lost close to 9%. Switching to the 4-cylinder, we can see the same pattern, an immense decline followed by a flattening, resulting in a year-over-year decline of 7.2%. Still a high number, but remember that the 4-cylinders are much newer than the 6-cylinders.
So the US market flipped south while the UK market started to flatten out. But before we talk about what this means for buyers, sellers and owners, I still want to have a look at the German market. What's happening over there?
We can see that V6 prices were strong till the beginning of 2025, but flipped between April and July. This means that the V6 is now 8.4% cheaper than 1 year ago. Yet, similar to what we saw before, there's a difference between the newest and the oldest Emiras. The cars with a few kilometers lost between 10 and 12%, whereas cars with more than 8,000 kilometers lost only a few percentage points. Prices for the 4-cylinders never increased, they just fell slower, while prices in the V6 market went up. But also this changed in 2025. Technically prices didn't flip, but for sure started to decrease quicker. They're now 5.7% cheaper than 1 year ago.
Now, out of all the countries, the situation in the US is perhaps the worst. There's a strong, linear downtrend. In Germany, the trend also turned down recently, but we don't know yet if this will continue. So let's zoom into the US market.
Looking at the market trend, we can see that the average year-over-year price change sits at plus 0.5%, and that the confidence interval for the average ranges between minus 2.75 and plus 2.75. Moreover, the bottom value just turned, indicating a potential weakening market. Compared to the Emira, the Emira market is of course underperforming. Yet, that comparison isn't completely fair.
Now, the trend contains both old and new cars, and various models ranging from 458 Speciales to Miatas. Moreover, 25% of the cars for which I'm tracking the prices actually lost between 5.5 and 30%. So let's make some comparisons to direct competitors.
The M2G87 is cheaper than the Emira, but perhaps appeals to a similar audience. We can see that prices are down by 5.4% and that the trend turned south during 2025. The 4-liter Cayman GTS has been around much longer than the Emira, but you could still buy model year 2025 cars. Looking at the price trend, we can see a flattening, resulting in a year-over-year increase of plus 1.3%. The 3-liter Supra is half the price of an Emira, but also in this market we can see a fairly flat price development of minus 0.6%. Even the C8 Corvette Stingray saw a minor flattening in 2025, leading to a 6.8% year-over-year decrease. V8 are a bit older than Emiras, but also they did well at minus 1%. The Evora GT is also a bit older, but as we can see, has a much stronger price trend. Prices increased by 3.3% during last year. Only the latest F-Type R lost more than the Emira at 12.5%.
So what does this mean for you if you're a value-conscious buyer?
If you're in the US, the Emira is probably not the most value-conscious choice if you're in the market for a sports car. We saw that prices flipped and have been falling linearly, that the inventory data isn't very strong, and that the competitors of the Emira are depreciating much slower.
If you're in the UK though, you might have been thinking about selling your Emira. Falling values are discussed widely on various forums, but it all seems to be changing now.
We saw that the depreciation rate started to decrease, so if you sell now, you're selling at a point when things are just starting to cool down. If you love the Emira but have been nervous about the falling prices, the recent data might convince you to hold on to it. Prices aren't flat, but the worst appears to be behind us.
If you're a UK buyer on the sidelines, the recent decrease in depreciation might even convince you to buy one.
But what if you're in Germany?
We saw that prices just started to turn, but it's of course unclear if this will materialize in a linear downtrend like we saw in the US. Provided you care about values, I think it makes sense to wait a few months and monitor the price trend closely.
And with that we arrive at the end of the video.
Now, if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car prices but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you find detailed market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks for a fresh market update.